Hey guys, Chris Dorry here. In this one today, I'm going to cover my best 22 under the age of 22. So, the rules for this are they need to have been drafted in 2017 or any time after that, and they have to be born in 1999 or later. So, for this exercise, I gave myself half an hour, so apologies for anyone that I've missed, but I feel pretty satisfied with this list. So let me know in the comment section below how I go. So what I've created here is I've got basically a first team, a second team, and pretty much an unlucky list of some of the others that I've given consideration to. So starting off in defence, Lachie Jones, Sam Taylor, Charlie Ballard. So Lachie Jones, look, he's only just played his first game for Port Adelaide, but I've got a lot of faith in his game. Seeing what he did through the Sandful finals last year, I think is going to be a ripper, and I think he's got future midfield potential as well. So plays with a real physical aggression for those who haven't seen him already, but has some explosive pace and a very long penetrating kick, but uses it very nicely. So I think as we see more of his games, we'll see more of that. Sam Taylor, I feel very confident with as a key defender. I think not only can he lock down opponents, but I think more and more we'll get that intercepting component to his game there as well. And then Charlie Ballard, look, his kicking isn't great. That's probably the one slight hesitation, but elite interceptor and having that guy, and look, he can take opposition key forwards and beat them too. So I really have a lot of faith in his game there too. Moving to the half back line, so Heath Chapman, Noah Bolter, Braden Campbell. So Chapman, Fremantle might turn him into something like a tall midfielder in the future, but running off half back, great kick, can provide run as well, really good interceptor. So, and being that sort of 193-ish thereabouts, he's really good for that height, and already having that immediate game, I think is going to be terrific in the long run. So he could be something like that Grant Birchall if he stays back, or he could be some sort of tall midfielder. So maybe in your David Mundy sort of mould potentially could be what Fremantle might be looking at there. So yeah, I think he'll be a beauty for the long run. Noah Bolter, he'd be just about one of the first players I'd be picking, where you can play him just about anywhere and he's going to have an impact. But coming off half back, look, great interceptor, can generate meaningful run, has the long kick. If he is great at ground level as well, winning those ground balls. So yeah, he's got pretty much every tool in his toolkit, and yeah, he's got the upside to be really as good as anyone out there. And you could play him key forward. You could have him as a second ruck if you want. He could go into centre bounces, win his own ball burst out. So yeah, he's really someone that I'd be very insistent on including. And then to take the kickouts from defence, so I'd be looking at Braden Campbell, and he'd be the guy where, look, in defence, I'd be trying to get the ball in his hands as much as possible ultimately. So my view is he'll become one of the very best kicks in the competition, and he's also got that explosive run to go with it. Not necessarily the level of interceptor of a lot of these other guys, and hasn't necessarily had that time across halfback that a lot of others have, having really played a lot as a junior through the midfield and as a forward. But yeah, I love the move that Sydney made to move him into defence. It just perfectly suits his attributes. And again, having that kick where he can be one of the top, he could be a top 2 kick in the competition, maybe even top 1 day. So being that level of ball user, having the penetration, he's sort of like a Daniel Rich plus in defence. So yeah, I think he's going to be sensational for a long time. And really, I'd be trying to reduce Jake Lloyd's reliance, or Sydney's reliance on Jake Lloyd, and really give Braden Campbell a lot more of the ball. And even if it means even a Jordan Dawson loses a bit of the ball, I'd love to see that happen. But moving across the centre line, so this is the really fascinating line that I'm interested to hear some thoughts in the comment section below as to how this structure could realistically function. But I'm going 2 tall wings. So I've got Jack Lukosius on one wing, I've got Adam Serra in the centre, and then I've got Nick Cox on the other wings. So Nick Cox is someone where through last year's draft, look, given there were no games last year, I just couldn't rate him as highly as others did because I didn't get to see his development. Rate of development is a key factor in determining will a key position player turn out well. So, and Cox has developed like crazy in his last 2 games for Essendon, have been absolutely phenomenal. So credit where it's due, and he's that elite endurance runner, but then he's got the midfield like skills, He's got marking weapons. He reads the ball really well in flight. So there's a lot there that suggests he can be a real weapon. And whether he's pushing back to intercept, pushing forward to be a marking target forward of centre, that's great to have there. And then a Jack Lukosius. So I'd have him leading up at the ball every opportunity, just trying to feed him as much of the ball as I can, because his kicking inside 50 will be phenomenal. And looking back the other round, well, he was second in metres gained in the competition. So being able to do that across a wing, that's phenomenal. In his only third year, last year he was second in the comp for metres gained out of defence, but now being able to transition that to the wing, that's perfect. So he could be that possible 200 mark per year sort of player. So if he continues sort of in that wing sort of forwardish role, I think that can be really good if you keep feeding him. But yeah, why I like Adam Serra in the centre, so you can play him anywhere. So he gives you a great deal of optionality where you can put him behind the ball, beautiful ball user. But what a lot of people don't know, and you can play him inside outside, but what a lot of people won't be aware of is he can actually go forward and hit the scoreboard. So in some of his games as a junior, he'd actually kick 4 goals in a game if you give him those minutes forwards. So that's something I'd like to see him sort of tap into a bit more at AFL level in the future, but I see him having that scope. So I think he'll be really good for a long time. And then I've got Connor Rozee. So really good piece. He can impact games anywhere. You can put him across halfback. He'll run, carry, do a lot of damage. But yeah, I love him sort of across half forward. Can really play a lot of forward pressure, help create those turnovers, let those taller defenders get those intercepts and get the ball into the hands of those ball users to generate rebound. So having those factors, that's fantastic there. And then you've got a Logan McDonald. So I think he's an absolute ripper. Again, if I'm going to do a redo of last year's draft, I'm taking Logan McDonald number 1. Nick Cox could possibly contend for that, and he could be possibly in that conversation for that 2 spot, but I've still got Logan McDonald as that best key forward. And seeing that rate of improvement, seeing his performance already at AFL level, he's going to fill out and he's going to be a problem. So great at ground level, has the endurance base, great kick, converts in front of goal. So there's so much there already. And he goes for his marks, can leap, take his marks, but as he gets stronger, and assuming he maintains that sort of, I guess, running capabilities, he'll be incredible. So he's someone I'd be absolutely insistent on having as one of my very first pick players. And then Zach Butters. So I actually think out of all these guys, he could become the best midfielder out of really this whole under-22 group. For now, I've got him across half forward because, look, you can put him across there and he's still going to rack it up and really hurt the opposition side. So, but I'd have him firmly in that midfield rotation and really getting his centre bounce minutes. So I think that's that next evolution in his game, and something that if Port Adelaide don't necessarily give him those CBA opportunities this year, I think next year he'll get those and he'll become one of the absolute elite midfielders in the comp, maybe even a top 3 midfielder next year. I'm happy to call it this early stage. So, really look out for him in future years because he could be that, I don't want to say quite Gary Ablett, but that Gary Ablett Jr.-esque sort of talent type where he could really break out and become nearing that sort of caliber of player with some real high-end capabilities. So, my strong suggestion is don't sleep on Butters because he'd be one of my very first picked, and I've loved the way he's started. And with Butters, I've also loved his year-by-year progression as well. So as a junior, look, he was good, probably deserved to go around where he got picked, but then year on year, he's really moved up my rankings from that draft just because he's improving at a faster rate than really most everyone else just about. So, I'm a big fan of him, and I'd even take him above a Bailey Smith or Sam Walsh from that draft of that sort of, I guess, midfield group, if you like. So, I'm really excited by Zach Butters and love his game. Cozzy Pickett, he was one where, look, I knew what he brought to the table going into last year's draft, but I didn't expect him in year 2 to be this caliber of player, nor at any stage for that matter. So, hitting the scoreboard as he is, he applies manic forward pressure, just that great ground level presence. So, if you're going to have this many talls, you really need that ground level player. And I've even gone Pickett on the field ahead of Rankin, which almost hurts me in some ways, where I'm still a huge Rankin fan, but seeing the start of the year for Pickett and how he's come out of the blocks, assuming he continues that form, I think he holds this spot and really should be there for most teams, I would have thought, for those that are actually bothered to watch Melbourne, because they're off to a great start and they're one of the real surprise packets for season 2021. So credit where it's due. Jamara, again, yet to debut. Speculative call, many would be suggesting here, but I'm happy to make it. I'm a believer in Jamara. So just, again, that aerial assault like I've never seen. He can be close to goal, that absolute most dominant force inside 50. So if I've got an opportunity to get someone on that sort of that caliber, I'm absolutely grabbing him. So I'm taking Jamara. And although you've got the likes of, say, a Max King, a Ben King, they're great in front of goal and as those presents sort of close to goal, but I would still be somewhat tempted by Jamara first. But yeah, look, given he hasn't yet played, it is hard to pick him first. But look, being able to have them all, that makes my sort of selection here very simple, to say the least. So, but then, yeah, having Max King as well, look, is that great contested marking target close to goal. He's got that height as that ruck height, sort of that 204-ish centimetre key forward. And yeah, look, having those sort of marking weapons, having that reach, but then also being as capable as he is at ground level. Again, he'll provide that pressure, get some inside 50 tackles. So yeah, absolutely, he's someone that I'd be wanting in my team. And again, being that tall, look, if, say, a Luke Jackson needs to be rested, you can put a Max King in the ruck, or Ben King from the bench could go into the ruck. So you've got some options there where you've got enough height to really play around. And a Nick Cox on the wing, here's another option where, look, if you really want to utilise those taller key forwards closer to goal, you can always put a Cox in the ruck and you'd be fine. But yeah, through the ruck, look, it's a hard call because there's no great young rucks. And look, until they get to their mid-20s, you really don't know who's going to turn out to be good or not. But yeah, for now, I'll put my money on Luke Jackson as that guy. So look, just freak athlete. I don't love how Melbourne have been using him as that, I guess, key forward who sort of relieves in the ruck. He really needs to be a genuine number one ruck, otherwise he struggles. But look, Melbourne don't have those key forward options, so that just sort of makes it a bit hard there. But yeah, look, he'll be a good ruckman, can really fly, he'll get those hit outs, follows up pretty well. He's a competitive bloke, so can take some aerial marks, just that high flyer. Bit undersized for a ruck, but yeah, look, I think he makes it work and he can be a pretty good piece. But look, I think there's probably going to be, there could be a couple of rucks who turn out to be better than Jackson, but for now it's just the safe pick where there's no obvious, definitely better guy in the long run. So I'm pretty happy with that. And another sort of curious dynamic I could play as well is if I wanted a bit more sort of height and size through the midfield, yeah, I could put a Noah Bolter through there as a bit of shock factor, but another guy I could possibly do that as well with is Luke Jackson. So just having that sort of size, strength, he is capable enough at ground level and can win some of his own balls. So just for a few stoppages here or there, I'd almost be tempted to sort of, I guess, play into that and just, I guess, give those opportunities to those different tools just to, I guess, create some unusual dynamics that'll be hard to play against. So yeah, having that I think is pretty handy. Matt Rao, look, unfortunately he's had the injuries both last year and sort of this year, early stages. So unlucky start, but just given the class of player he is, look, he's someone I just can't ignore and not include. So enough said there. And then Luke Davies-Uniacke. So he's really stepped up his game this year. Last year he broke out. This year he's found another gear. And look, he's just that strong, explosive ball winner, has the tools. I think in the future he adds that forward component to his game. So yeah, I think he's going to be a ripper for a long time. So yeah, he's someone I really wanted to include in there. And then the bench. So Ben King I've mentioned already. Look, he's another great key forward. You could interchange he and Max. So you've got a lot of those options there. With a Ben King, though, he does have a few more options than a Max. Like you can play him as a key defender if you want. So if you want to put, say, a Noah Bolter through the midfield for a bit of shock factor, you can put a Ben King behind the ball. Or you could use him centre half forward. I'd be even tempted just to use him also mostly a forward, but have him rotating as that relieving ruck when Luke Jackson needs those rest minutes. So that's how I'd be working with that. But again, given how well he's played, as with his brother, look, you need to include him. Bailey Smith, to me, he's still one of the best midfielders. I slightly prefer a Bailey Smith to a Sam Walsh, but they're both neck and neck. You have to include them both. They're both of that caliber where you just have to have them. And look, they can both play both inside and outside, so they both give you those options as well. So having those options where you don't have to go tall and then you can put, say, a Cox or a Lukosius either forward or back. You can sort of have those more, I guess, regular running types on the outside, I suppose, to put it that way. And then a Rankin as a small forward. So if you've got a Rankin forward, it really gives you those options to put a Butters through the midfield, a Rosie. You can put him anywhere. You could put him behind the ball if you wanted. So just as a chemistry fit, I like that. And I think with Rankin, look, although he's been disappointing so far this year, I think he's just too talented to not be doing more than he is. And I think give him maybe another year, and I think he can really be a monster of a crumbing forward. So he's a very intentional addition to this team. And I think if you put him around a number of really high quality forwards and have him on a good team, I think he's really going to be a problem. But for my AFL sort of second team, I suppose, to put it that way, under the age of 22. So all these guys were very strong considerations and could very easily have fit in. So Hayden Young, really like him. Where great kick. He can be a top 5 kick in the competition in a few years. I don't think he's far off already, honestly, and is someone where I'd be giving him as many kickouts as possible in Fremantle's situation. Denver Granger Barras, look, good key defender. Just don't think is quite as good as these others. A bit skinny for me, but we'll just have to see how good he becomes. Quaynor in defence, I'm looking at him as a good defender. I think he'll be able to stop his opponents and provide run from defence. Good enough kicks. So you've got those, I guess, combination of components to his game where he's a piece, but not necessarily an overwhelmingly great one on the levels necessarily that I'm looking at some of the others, where I don't think he's got necessarily the points of difference of, say, a Campbell with that extent of a kick, or a Chapman where you've got that height and those different tools. So for me, Quaynor's not quite in that same class as that first team. Caulfield, love him as an interceptor, has the evasion, has the mobility, so you've got a lot of tools there. Really good ball user, so I really like him, and seeing what he did last year, look, he needs to be in that mix for selection. But again, for me, just outside of that, but firmly in the mix. I just preferred a few younger guys who, for the same age, are a bit more advanced than Caulfield was. Tom McCartan, look, until this year, I haven't liked him, but since he's moved back in sort of the latter part of last year, he's come along and he looks like a piece. So I'd be comfortable having McCartan in here, but does he deserve to be in the first team? No. I think there's certainly the 3 key defenders I've got there in Taylor, Ballard and Bolter, I think are pretty clearly ahead. And again, I can put a Lukosius back if I want to. So McCartan wouldn't make that, but as a second team, look, without that many other great key defence options that I'm seeing at this stage, he's probably that guy for now. Lockie Ash, I really like him, can provide a lot of run and carry from defence, creates meaningful drive. I think he'll be a really good piece for GWS for a long time as that sort of, I guess, driver out of defence and that primary sort of rebounder. So, I think he'll be good. But again, is he better than the others? Look, I prefer sort of a Campbell as that sort of equivalent for my team. So, but Ash is definitely a solid sort of second team selection there for me. Nick Blakey, look, maybe had a Nick Cox not had the last 2 games that he would have, maybe he'd be a consideration for me. But I think a Nick Cox has pretty well gone past him for, I guess, the same age and stage. So, still really like Blakey's game. He gives you a lot of versatility, a lot of options. Just, again, one of that sort of, I guess, tall sort of, I guess, prototype type that I'm really enjoying on the outside. So, he just gives you a lot of options. James Worpel, good midfielder. He already won that best and fairest sort of the other year. So, really good piece and still playing really good footy. I just query whether he necessarily has the upside of a lot of these other midfielders that I've selected in the first team, though. That's why I've got him in the second team. But again, I'm pretty comfortable with him in the second team. I think he's pretty solid and deserves to be there. Xavier Dersma, really good outside piece. Provides the run, finds a lot of the footy. But again, I prefer that sort of almost tall winger type a lot more so. So that's just a personal preference thing there. But again, Dersma's a perfectly good piece for those that would choose to select him. Errol Goulden, one of the surprise packets from this year's draft for me. I thought he'd be sort of playing early and often, probably best 22 from round one. So I was right in that much, but where I was very wrong is the level of play that he's playing at. So as with a Nick Cox, and Errol Goulden really is playing on another level. So probably even the best performed to date from last year's draft, to be honest. Just the class is showing, is finding a lot of the footy. But yeah, just the ball use, covering the ground, finding it. He's looking really good. So credit to him for playing the footy is. So yeah, really like him. Could be considered for the first team, but when you've got the likes of Butters, Rosie, I do see a different sort of class and I do see a different upside. Whereas with a Goulden, I think is probably sort of who he'll be for much of his career. I'm not sure he quite has those, I guess, levels of upside where he can really take too many more steps comparative to a Butters or a Rosie, who I think are really just sort of, I guess, at the very early stages of, I guess, where their upside could really see them go to. Aaron Norton, look, he is a tough one for me to, I guess, have miss out on selection, and very close. So would I have he or a Ben King? Look, he's just had a few inconsistent years. This year is looking fantastic. So off this year's play, you'd absolutely include him. And look, considered strongly for a key defence position. Possibly I could remove a Ballard, put in a Norton in defence. So there are those options there. So Norton was probably the most unlucky to miss my first team selection, I suppose you could say. But yeah, with guys like Nick Cox developing, yeah, look, I'm just comfortable having him in the second team. Just with his kicking, not all that good either, a bit as with a Ballard. So, but yeah, certainly has the endurance, really good mark, he's a threat, and you can have him at either end, key forward, key back. He'd be great in either spot. So really have to acknowledge him, give him the full credit. But yeah, very unlucky miss just due to how good this next generation of, I guess, key position players are, in my view, that are still coming through and still really have a lot of development in them for mine. Noah Anderson, really like him. He can have an impact whether it's midfield, inside or outside, cross half forward. You can play him deeper forward if you want. He'll really impact games, but taken several steps forward in his game this year. So looks like a good piece. He'll keep getting better. Looking pretty durable already. So yeah, I think he's a high value piece for Gold Coast. So yeah, look, could be considered for my first team selection. Might even push me in another year or so for reconsideration for this sort of team. So yeah, definitely don't be sleeping on Noah Anderson. Really underrated in my view, and really needs probably a bit more talk around him, I'd say. Caleb Sarong, people would be surprised to see me name him in the forward pocket, but yeah, as a junior, look, he was just as good whether it's through the midfield or forward. So, of course, you'd have him rotating through the midfield. He's a great midfielder at AFL level already. But, yeah, look, I think there is a bit more options to play him forward. And I guess just to have that expanded midfield rotation without necessarily that ultra high-end sort of forwards group. Look, I've just put Sarong forward just because he can play there more so than it's not necessarily his best position. I think he's still a little better through the midfield, but he can play forward. So that might be something that a lot of people might not be aware of. Riley Thilthorpe, really good key forward, really good ruckman. Yet to see him play yet, obviously, for Adelaide, but I think he's going to be a really good piece for them. So, yeah, he's someone to definitely look forward to seeing also. And then Oscar Allen. So when Josh Kennedy retires, I think he's going to be West Coast number one option inside 50 if he doesn't become that already this year. So, yeah, really good piece. It's been frustrating having to see him sort of push through the ruck as much as he's had to, but I think he's just a really good key forward. So, yeah, definitely deserves, in my view, to be here. Tom de Koning, look, he's a late bloomer. Wasn't sure about him as a junior. He was sort of a key forward who just dropped too many marks, basically. But he seems like a later bloomer in so much as, I guess, he's just grown later and grown a bit more than I'd sort of expected. So given the progression he's made since sort of joining the AFL system, he's got that upside once he hits that sort of 25 mark to be a really good ruckman, basically. So, yeah, I think he deserves to be here. There's no other obvious piece to have in front of him, again, just due to, I guess, that lack of certainty around any of the younger rucks in the competition. So that's why he earns that spot. Andrew Brayshaw, a lot of people would argue that he'd go into the first team. I'm not necessarily sure who I'd move him in front of. In the comments section below, let me know if you're a Brayshaw fan and who you'd put him ahead of those midfielders. Probably a lot of people would be saying don't go so tall and take out a tall for him. And if so, fair enough. But I just really like all those talls. And the advantage if I had all these talls in my best 22 would be this. So if I had an injury, so let's say a Noah Bolter gets hurt, I could easily put Lukosius across centre half back, and then I could easily just bring in, say, like put a Walsh on a wing and bring in, say, another midfielder or some other position. And then having a Nick Cox on a wing, same story. It just gives me that really great optionality where I don't really need a lot of depth in terms of outside of that best 22. So if you've really got this extent of quality with a Lukosius and a Cox, you've got all these really good tools at either end, well, you don't have to lose any sleep or have that like-for-like swap to come in. So that's what I really like about this AFL first team of mine for the best 22 under 22. So, but yeah, with a Brayshaw, look, I'm just seeing him really as a pure mid, not necessarily that great across other positions. So, yeah, given those limitations, I just prefer a few others who are a little bit younger and I think can just surpass him a little bit. But yeah, look, Brayshaw, high volume accumulator, ball use getting better, covers a lot of ground, so he's a really good mid. So strongly deserves to be in the second team, and if you have him in your first team, look, I can't blame you for that. So Hunter Clark, really like the look of, and I think he's going to get better and better. So St Kilda, they've had to use him across half back too much, but I think his best position in the long run is going to be through the midfield. And maybe sort of as we progress through the season, maybe we get to see more of him through the midfield. But yeah, I really think he's going to be absolutely fantastic through there. So, but of course can run from half back, provide that run and carry. But yeah, as that sort of centre bounce midfielder, he's got that contested side, can win the clearances, rack up a lot of the footy. But then he's also got those weapons as shown across halfback, where ball use, he's got the class, has the runs. So he'd be one where I'd even be tempted to have him ahead of a Brayshaw for selection in the first team if I wanted to include another midfielder for whatever reason. I have a lot of faith in his game. So, and I think there's quite a bit of untapped potential there too, given he hasn't had those midfield opportunities really in the years past. James Rowbottom, look, I think he's only played the one game so far this year, but he's someone where, a bit like almost in that Zach Butters respect, where he's really year on year shown that progression, and he's got a really strong contested side of his game. So as that sort of, I guess, stoppage specialist, that really good ball winning midfielder with all those hard components, Rowbottom's a really good piece. So if a Sydney fan said, hey, put him in the first team, I'd say, look, if you do, that's not all that far wrong necessarily. And look, if you're taking out a tall, maybe he's one you consider if you want to go marginally younger than, say, a Brayshaw. But yeah, look, for a second team purpose, I really want to give him the respect of including him in there. Tom Green, he's one of my personal favourites, as many are aware. Not really getting the opportunities for GWS through the midfield that he deserves, frankly. But if he was on, say, another team where he could just be that centre bounce midfielder, first possession winner, I've said it before and I'll say it again, he can be the best first possession winner in the competition. So put him on an Essendon team like that where they don't have that sort of, I guess, strong, big-bodied midfielder. Tom Green can be the man through there. So yeah, that'll be something to watch maybe in the future if there's trade opportunities that open up and if GWS want to, I guess, improve their, I guess, team balance within their best 22. Maybe a Tom Green or maybe it's a Jacob Hopper, maybe you can get one of those types off their hands. Because they just don't really need all those sort of same types, ultimately. Chad Warner, really good both through the midfield and across half forward. Big time improver this year, so deserves the credit and acknowledgement to be in this second team. So, yeah, wouldn't have said 12 months ago that he'd be in the mix, but yeah, he's earned it. So, well done to him, and he's one of the reasons why Sydney, among a number of other players for that matter, have really taken the next step this year. Brian Myers, really like him as a small forward, liked him in his draft year, still like him. He's a good piece, so have him as a crummer. He just, I guess, is there for that sort of balance purpose, whereas a good piece, and there's not too many really good small forwards in the comp, so... And then of those, I'd categorize as unlucky. So, look, if any of you have these guys in your second team, fair enough. I can really understand that. So, Michael Frederick, maybe it's probably an early call to some, perhaps. But whether it's across the wing, whether he's forward, really like his game. He has the speed, can provide the pressure, hits the scoreboard. There's just a lot to like there. And I think the more people are going to see him, the more people are going to like him. Will Day had a really good first year for Hawthorn. I think he's going to keep progressing ultimately, where I didn't see him improving nearly as much as he did last year, but he's got that composure, has the class. He's a good piece. So if you've got him in your team, fair enough. I can get that. Lockie Scholl, same story. Really good ball user. Covers a lot of the ground. If you've got him in your second team, fair enough. Just depends on how you want your players playing. But ultimately with these sorts of, outside style games, I probably, move them slightly down my rankings just because I by position I have a preferred prototype that these guys don't necessarily fit as perfectly into in terms of how I view them impacting games. Will Phillips, I think really with more games for North Melbourne, more responsibility, more centre bounce attendances, I think he'll really prove game on game he'll progress. So I think he'll be a really good midfielder. Those that are calling him a bust, I think that's premature talk. I think he's going to be a really good piece, but obviously I don't think he'll be in the league of a Logan McDonald. So that's my view there, but I think he's still going to be really good. And I think he can still be better than a Tom Powell. So we'll see how that goes, but that's a wait and see. But I think they can be in a similar conversation, if not Phillips ahead for me. Lockie Fogarty, really looking good this year for Carlton, so I'll give him the props that he deserves since his cross from Geelong, where he wasn't necessarily getting the regular opportunities that I perhaps would have argued that he should have. So yeah, credit to him for making the most of that. But yeah, whether he's forward, midfield, just that really good rotational piece, brings the pressure, can win his own footy, uses it pretty well. So yeah, no complaints there. Braden Ham, he's someone for Essendon. I didn't expect necessarily to see him play such consistent footy, but he's having a good year. He's always someone where he's had the weapons, had the speed, good kick, but just wasn't finding the footy, but he is this year. So one of the beneficiaries of the new man on the mark rules, the game becoming more outside. So it really brings a Braden Ham into, the mix as that sort of appropriate sort of player where you'd want him on your team now. So yeah, credit to him for really turning things around and becoming that piece. After really being someone where coming into this year, I would have doubted he'd necessarily be someone who deserves to be retained. So really good to see him play such good footy because he has the talent. So great to see him realise it. Sam Berry playing really good footy in his first year there for Adelaide. So good ball winner, has the acceleration. I've spoken about him a lot in my draft videos, but he's someone where I thought he was a bit underrated. And look, credit to him is really showing that he deserves to really be someone, considered for this sort of list. Same story with Tom Powell. He was probably taken around where he should have, but he was in really a conversation with a real large mix of them, I suppose. But playing good footy right out of the gates and not really surprising given how well he was playing last year. So really good midfielder. Does he necessarily reach the heights of a lot of the guys in the first team, second team? Not sure, but I think he's going to be a really good piece. Finlay Macrae, tonight he's actually going to debut for Collingwood, and I think actually from debut night, and I tweeted about this during the week, but I think he can prove to be a decisive best 15 player on Collingwood's list really from this season. So watch for him. He's actually probably further advanced than his brother was at the same age and stage, but unfortunately last year there was no Victorian footy to see that development. But certainly that year out, although shorter, he was finding really more of the footy, having more of an impact, better user on both sides of the body. So I think is really going to prove to be a good piece. And he was really forced to play across half forward rather than midfield a lot during his draft year. So I think his numbers are a bit, reduced compared to what they could have been. And that's really just due to playing along the likes of Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, that caliber of player where there just wasn't those, midfield opportunities that he might have liked. Jai Caldwell, he's going to be a good piece for Essendon. Started off pretty solidly, so look, he's a good piece. Does he deserve to be in the second team or first team? Probably not, but I want to acknowledge him as a piece that I think is going to have a really long career and be a really effective component for Essendon through there. Zach Bailey, he's playing pretty good footy there for Brisbane, so he just does a lot of things really well. Just the way he moves, uses it well. There's just a lot of components there where it's just an exciting player. So if you wanted another small, if you argued he'd be in the second team, fair enough, I could get that. Jordan Clark, look, he's probably not quite had as much of an impact as I'd hoped coming into the year for Geelong, but I still do have belief in him and his game. So he has that run. I really think he just needs to be given a prominent role, get fed more of the ball, just really try and instill a lot of confidence in him, because he's really a big part of Geelong's future. And I think he can be a really, I guess, key driver out of defence across a wing, really be a high meters gain type who does a lot of good things there. Will Powell, good piece for Gold Coast. Again, I've got a lot of outside types here who a lot of guys would advocate for, and he can play across halfback as well, so whether it's halfback, wing, he gives you a lot of options there. So, but really has that pace, obviously, and yeah, he's taken another step, looks like a good piece. I think he'll keep improving progressively, but yeah, there's others I prefer. Georgiades, he's a piece for Port Adelaide, that sort of tall marking key forward, bit undersized, but yeah, he's a good piece, but again, when you've got the caliber of others ahead of him, hard to include. Taron Thomas has a lot of fans. You can really play him anywhere, midfield, inside, outside, running off halfback, cross half forward. You can do whatever you want with him, but again, there's others I prefer, but maybe there's a few North Melbourne fans that still really want to advocate for him in this sort of conversation. Trent Rivers, good piece. You can play him midfield, halfback. Really classy, but wins his own footy. Can find a lot of it. So, yeah, he's a good piece. He'll be good for a long time for Melbourne. So, and I think he was really one of the value picks in his region of the draft in the 2019 draft it would have been. So, yeah, he's a good component. And then Jake Riccardi. So, there's probably no one much really talking about him, but I really love the way he came really onto the scene last year for GWS and really had an impact right away. And I've spoken about this type of player before, but he's really a year-on-year progression guy who, in his draft year, didn't really do anything as an overager in the TAC Cup or NAB League, whatever it was at that time. Really took that next step, really showed a lot of signs, and then went up to the VFL, basically won, I guess, best young player award there, and that, I guess, rising star equivalent awards. So, yeah, look, really went really well there. And then first year in the AFL really came onto the scenes and was, I guess, a real factor there too. So here's someone I'm still really excited about. If for whatever reason with the Riccardi it doesn't work as a key forward, I'd even move him as a key back, because being that aerial assault of a marking type, given he's got those sort of gifts, you could put him into defence and he can really be a factor there. So, yeah, he's someone I would really like on my list. And if a GWS, say, towards the end of this year sort of felt he's not quite inside my best 22, I'd be making a play at him if I was, let's say, a Collingwood or some other team, I guess, lacking that key position player. So I think he's got a really strong future ahead of him too. Thanks for watching, guys, and let me know in the comments section below who would be your best 22 under the age of 22, and which players did I miss on my list that I should have included, and yeah, which guys from my best 22 perhaps shouldn't quite be in there. Who would you be bringing out in their place? That'd be interesting to hear also. But if you enjoy this video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't already, and see you in the next video.